The camera in the corner had been there for months. Nobody had watched the footage until the day it became impossible to ignore. They thought their English bulldog was becoming food aggressive. The camera showed something no one expected. Winston was 4 years old and roughly the shape of a very confident footstool. English bulldog, 48 pounds, brindle and white, with the permanently skeptical expression his breed carried like a house sigil. He was not a demonstrative dog. He did not jump up. He did not perform enthusiasm. He had exactly one speed, and that was steady, and steady worked well in their house for 3 years before Nadia arrived. Nadia was 18 months old, which is the age at which toddlers become genuinely unpredictable in their approach to dogs, the phase where they have enough mobility and motor commitment to reach things but not enough judgment to know whether reaching them is wise. She had been around Winston her whole life. Winston had been around her. They had established a functional détente. The détente ended in April. Nadia had begun independently approaching the kitchen more frequently, which corresponded with her increasing understanding that things she wanted were sometimes in the kitchen. One of the things in the kitchen was Winston's food bowl, which was on a mat near the back door, and which Nadia found interesting in the way she found everything at floor level interesting. She had approached it several times. Each time, Winston had positioned himself between Nadia and the bowl, which is food protective behavior which Howard and Diane had read about, and which their previous experience with dogs suggested required management. The baby gate went across the kitchen entrance on a Tuesday. If you stay for stories about what animals sense before we do, you are in the right place. Subscribe so you do not miss the next one. On Thursday, Howard realized the security camera in the kitchen corner, which they had installed 18 months ago, and mostly forgotten about, had been running continuously. He pulled up the footage on his laptop. He watched for 40 minutes. What he saw was not Winston protecting his food bowl. What he saw was Winston approaching Nadia's vicinity in the living room each time she ate or drank anything, and pressing his nose toward the lower half of her face, not to her mouth specifically, to the area around her chin and jaw. He did this with the methodical consistency of a dog following a routine. After each approach, he would circle to her right side and stay close for several minutes, watching her before returning to his mat. The food bowl behavior Howard realized watching the footage came immediately after. Winston would approach the food bowl, which was empty, as it was always empty between his scheduled meals, and push it with his nose. Then look toward the kitchen gate, then push the bowl again. He was not protecting the bowl. He was using it to get someone to come into the kitchen and look at him. Has your dog ever done something that made no sense until it was the only thing that made sense? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard. Howard called the pediatrician's office at 8:47 on Friday morning and described what he had seen in the footage. The nurse practitioner, a woman named Veronica Suresh, who had been in pediatrics for 14 years, asked him to send a clip of the footage. He did. She reviewed it and called back within the hour and asked him to bring Nadia in that afternoon. The examination included, at Veronica's suggestion, a salivary pH test that had not previously been part of any of Nadia's routine checkups. The results showed a salivary acidity level consistent with early-stage acid reflux that had likely been building for 4 to 6 weeks. Subclinical, no visible distress in Nadia's behavior, no obvious symptoms, no vomiting. But the chemistry in the area around her mouth and jaw had been altered by the condition in ways that were detectable. To a bulldog with a short, flat muzzle that created concentrated airflow and a scent receptor density that more than compensated for what the nose lacked in length, Dr. Nadia, who saw them for the follow-up, said plainly the acidity was changing the scent profile around her face. He was detecting a chemistry that was different from her baseline. He didn't know what it meant, he just knew something was different and he was trying to show you. The bowl pushing, the looking back, he was using every tool he had to ask someone to pay attention. Every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never ask for anything in return. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. Nadia's reflux has been managed for 6 weeks. She is asymptomatic. Her dietary protocol is simple. At her last checkup, Dr. Okeke described her as doing beautifully, which was a word that landed differently than it would have 8 weeks ago. Howard removed the baby gate from the kitchen on a Wednesday afternoon. Winston walked through the gap without ceremony and went to his mat and lay down and looked at Nadia with the permanently skeptical expression of his breed. She looked back at him with the permanently curious expression of her age. Neither of them moved for a moment. Then Nadia sat down on the kitchen floor approximately 4 feet from Winston, which is within her comfortable proximity, and began pulling at her socks. Winston put his chin on the mat and exhaled. He closed his eyes, which he almost never did in the daytime, and Nadia pulled off one sock and looked at it, and then looked at the dog and appeared to find both equally interesting. Howard leaned against the door frame and watched them and thought about the footage and the bowl and the 40 minutes on a Thursday evening that changed what he thought he understood. The next story on this channel, a Great Pyrenees who refused to let a toddler approach a section of the backyard, and what the family found when they finally looked where the dog kept looking.